Welcome everybody. I'm Irene Pasternack, teaching Feldenkrais with Northwest Parkinson's. And let's start by hearing how you used last week's lesson. What's happening as you use your shoulders in different ways. Joan, I know you had something you wanted to share.
Yeah, I found that moving like this can make me feel better, move faster, and it's amazing. And I used it frequently around the house even. And there you get up and you say, oh, but then you start and it goes away.
It like immediately takes away the hunch that we get when we're slouched in a couch, when we're reading, when we're on our computer, because you've got these handles on the edge of your ribs, your shoulders, and by moving them, it gets your spine turning and more upright in the thoracic. And I think if there was one magic wand I could wave over everybody, that is to find that easier access to being upright and mobile in that part of the spine. Because I think, and listening to you, Joan, I hear like this pleasure, like it just made me feel good. Yeah. And I think that is where pleasure lives in our bodies. And it's physiological. You know, when you hold a baby and you cuddle a baby against your chest, the hormone oxytocin is released in the body. And so for a woman, if we're nursing a baby, the milk lets down. But that same sensation of just, life is good has to do with movement of that spot. And this is just one of the easiest ways to access it, as well as it lets you find your balance over each foot better when you're doing that, because you're turning your torso. And it lets you take longer steps with your legs because it frees your hips to move. So it's like the one thing that resets your mood, your balance, your power, and your pleasure. So, well, so we're going to keep working with shoulders today. One of the requests from 2 weeks ago was, how do I pick things up off the floor? And I'm just going to shift views here for a sec. And we're going to work with our shoulders first and then our hips for picking things up. But let's do a couple measurement things. Just as you're sitting there, imagine you've dropped something and reach down to pick it up and feel, where do you work? Where's the effort? Or do you go like, you know, you're doing something in the kitchen, an onion drops on the floor and you go, well, I'll get it with the vacuum cleaner next time I vacuum. That's one strategy. Okay. And then reach out. Imagine there's a door in front of you. Put your hand on the doorknob, turn the doorknob, and open the door. And just feel, how do you do that? I was in my anatomy class this morning. We were talking about arms and why people have so many shoulder problems. And we decided in the class, the reason people have shoulder problems is because of modern fashion. And whether it's men wearing suit coats and ties, how many of you men went to work wearing a suit?
Part of the time.
Part of the time. Okay. There's something about being in that structure, because they don't make suits out of Lycra, right? So you're kind of trapped in that structure. You get used to not moving. But then in most clothes, like if you look at where the seams are in your clothes, there's usually a seam where the sleeve attaches, right? Sometimes not in t-shirts, but it's like we think the arm starts here and that's our arm, and we move just there. So my teacher this morning, Candy Canino, she said, if we all wore raglan sleeves, we would have no shoulder problems, because we would realize that our shoulder includes the clavicle, the shoulder blade, as well as the arm. So just, we need to imagine ourselves wearing raglan sleeves. I don't know if anybody has one on to demonstrate.
What's a raglan sleeve?
I figured the guys would be asking the question, what does that mean? Because it's not something found in men's clothes. It's a sleeve with where the fabric seam is more like here. It goes around that way. It's just a bigger cut to the sleeve. So we're going to play with the shoulder blade today. And just I want to give you some visuals before we play so that it makes more sense. When you lift your arm, the very first step to make it work well is that the scapula goes down. And when the scapula goes down, it points the joint at the top up. So it usually goes, that rotation in that plane of the scapula points this socket up, and then it becomes easier to lift without this top part pushing on anything sensitive in there. And so when you just lift your arm up to your shoulder height, and maybe even not quite up to your shoulder, see if you can feel how this can go down your back. And that lets you get this high. And then once this glenoid fossa, the socket, is pointed up, then you can raise the whole scapula up. And in the front, your whole collarbone is going up. But if you don't start it with first this little motion of down, of rotating to get this fossa pointed up, that's where everything otherwise binds with this lid over the joint. So you got to get that lid out of the way by tipping. And there's some tipping that happens in this direction. And there's some tipping that happens in this direction where the spine of the scapula goes closer to the rib and this outside goes outward. When you're opening a door, for example, you want to point this backward a little bit, and there a little distance gets created in there. So a scapula needs to be able to go down. It needs to be able to go down this way, go down that way, move left and right. Like if you hug somebody, your scapulas get wide around you. So we're going to play with getting more mobility in these guys for the first part of the class today. But I think it's just really helpful seeing this and going, that's where the, oh, whoops, Mira's not here and I'm not letting people in. Admit. That turning the scapula to keep this from getting squeezed by the bar on top is so critical. And you can't move the scapula, the shoulder blade, without moving your collarbone, because I gotta take him down for a moment. If you look at the top, see if I can, he's really heavy. If I can hold him stable enough that you can get a good view. The collarbone comes down and it has a joint with the shoulder blade. So the shoulder blade, we think of it as back behind us, but it comes around to the front to meet here. And all the tendons that move the arm go through this space but between them. And so we have to keep that space by moving that whole structure. That makes sense? No, I gotta put him back up there. And so many problems people have in their rotator cuff and the rotation muscles are if they don't turn that socket in the direction they want their arm to go first. And so then the muscles get pinched and you end up getting pain down in right at the bottom of the deltoid muscle right here. And you get pain up in there. And so everybody has their own rhythm of how they take this, they rotate it, they pull it out, the timing of what they do. And variations in that pattern of how you use it are what can lead to shoulder troubles. So let's start playing. And today for the playing, I'd like you to stand up and find, sit down for a moment. We're gonna do one step first, sorry. Put your hand on your forehead, either hand. And imagine your elbow is on a chalkboard and make a line up and down. What part of you is moving? Are your sit bones moving in your chair to make this line a little bit?
Not much.
Say it again, Rich.
Not much.
Not much, okay. Do you feel your spine right in this area that there's a little bending and lengthening in there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you put your fingers, one on the top of your sternum, one down at the bottom of your sternum, as you draw the line down, squeeze your fingers together and you'll feel your sternum flexes a little bit. And as you go up, your fingers will spread apart a little there. So you need to have your fingers nice and wide, one on the top and one near the bottom of the sternum to feel that. We don't tend to think about the sternum as being flexible, but there's some movement that happens in there. And then begin to sense your ribs. You could put your fingers lightly on the top ribs. When you draw the line down, sense how those ribs squeeze. And when you draw the line up, those ribs spread out a little. Or if you put your hand on your lower ribs, you might be able to feel it more clearly. And rest. So this is one of those lessons that could end up feeling like, oh, that was a big workout. And you want to try to keep it gentle. You might take breaks more often than I do, or move slower or smaller if you just to keep comfortable in your shoulder and not overwhelm. Okay. Hand back up on the forehead. And now draw a line left and right. And that one, there's many ways to do it. And I see people doing different ways. And I'm going to use Rich and Bill as examples. So the way Bill, show people what you're doing. Just do it a few times and look at Bill. Maybe I can spotlight you for a sec. No, I think that just does it locally. So you might want to be in gallery view so you can see each other. So Bill is pretty much starting the movement right here and coming forward with his elbow. And then Rich, show what you were doing. See how Rich's face and his shoulders are turning. So he's drawing the line kind of by moving on his sit bones. One sit bone goes forward and one goes backward. And that makes that line go. Okay, rest. Put your hand back up there and do some circles with your elbow. And feel how when you do this, the shoulder blade itself isn't necessarily moving that much. This is in some ways bypassing your shoulder and getting the movement to happen down in your lower spine and your sit bones. Try the circle in the other direction. Okay, and rest for a moment. Rest and see if something feels different in that shoulder. That might feel a little wider, a little broader, the neck a little longer. And then come over and stand up and find a wall. And stand sideways to the wall. The same hand on your head with that elbow touching the wall. So if you have, you might have to turn around depending, so you get the same hand that we were just playing with. And your elbow touches the wall. And begin to do that same thing of drawing a line up and down the wall with your elbow. And feel, how do you do that in standing? That there's a way that you move your hips toward the wall and away from the wall. That you spread your ribs out on one side and compress on the other. You might find the weight shifts on your feet a little to draw the line up and down. And again, not too much is happening in the shoulder because we're immobilizing it with the hand on the head. All right, and rest. I see people resting sooner. That's wonderful. And then put your hand on your head again and draw the line left and right and feel how you do that. That one hip goes forward, one hip goes backward. One shoulder goes forward, one shoulder goes backward, and then connect those two so that instead of making like a cross with your elbow, make a circle around the 4 points that you were just going to. So here what we're doing is getting your spine mobile enough that your scapula will be able to move once we stop doing this. Okay, and go the other way with the elbow. And then just stand and rest for a moment. So remember that this isn't exercise in the sense that we're not trying to do it lots of times or fast or powerfully, but with sensation, with curiosity of what are my feet doing? What's my nose doing as I do these elbow circles? What ribs are moving? Because that's what makes it stick as you take it out into your life, is that slowness and noticing things. Okay. Put your hand up on your forehead again. And now draw an 8 on the wall. And feel all the contortions your body has to do to draw an 8. You can draw a very small 8 with just little tiny movements, but they can still go all the way down to your feet. Sense how your feet can help you make a tiny little 8 on the wall. And then see if you could gradually let your 8 get bigger by moving your hips more. How could your hips make this 8 get bigger? Some ways this is like playing that old game of Twister, and that you're trying to find, how can I adjust? Good. It's interesting, isn't it? Go ahead and rest for a moment. Doing the circles was pretty easy for everybody. And then as soon as we added the complexity of the 8 and the switching back and forth, it got a little bit more challenging. Okay, come and sit down for a moment. And yawn for a moment. I'll start us. See if I can make it catch. And see if one side of your mouth opens a little more than the other as you yawn. There's a little more freedom. Feels good to yawn. Just usually paying attention to one side of the body will help soften the jaw on one side more than the other. Okay. And just in sitting, close your eyes. sit toward the front of your chair, your knees wide, and sense any differences you feel between your left side and your right side. You could start with your feet. Does one foot feel nicer on the floor? Flatter, wider, longer? Do your knees feel the same height? Do your sit bones feel the same? Which side of you feels taller? And then let's even ourselves out a little bit with this. So put your hand on your forehead, your second hand, the other one, and begin to find up and down. Feel, does your weight shift as you go up and down? Is it easier to go up when you're sitting on the same side sit bone as the arm that's going up? Or if you're sitting on the other sit bone? And which sit bone lets you go down further without feeling like you're going to fall over onto the floor? And then make your left, so you're doing it up, down. In this position, it's more back and forward with the elbow as the other direction, which you could imagine is left, right, if you turn your body a little bit. Just feel, does one knee come forward as your elbow goes to one side? And then the other knee goes a little forward as your elbow goes the other way. Try holding your breath in, holding your belly really still. Don't let your pelvis move at all, and go left and right and feel how much work that is in the muscles around the shoulder. And then do it from your pelvis. Okay, and then rest. It's amazing how quickly our brain resets just as we rest for a moment. Put the hand back up there and make some circles. And each of us has a particular plane that we draw our circle in. You could be drawing a circle like on the screen in front of you, or on the wall beside you, or somewhere in the middle. And feel how your weight can shift sit bone to sit bone. The ribs can participate. Okay, good. Go the other direction with the circle. Is this direction harder? A little harder to coordinate. Okay. And come and stand up and go to your wall again. This lesson is also getting at the muscles that we use to hold our head up. Put your elbow on the wall and begin to draw your line up and down. And feel how your hips can help that by moving your hips toward the wall and away. And a few times go left and right. And rest for a moment. Come back to the wall and make your circles in one direction and then the other. And notice, did everything just suddenly get a little smaller? Remember, you have hips that can circle in order to allow your elbow to do a bigger circle, that your weight shifts forward and backward, left and right on your feet. Okay. And then rest for a moment. And then do your figure 8 on the wall. And feel how the weight shift. Pay particular attention to how do you switch in the waist of the 8 in the narrow part? How do you switch from one way to the other? And is it different if you draw the 8 lying down like an infinity sign or a lazy 8? Okay. Rest and come back and sit down. Okay, for this next part of the lesson, there's going to be 2 ways to do it. Lying on the ground is the best. So if you can lie down like Rich is lying down there on the floor, that constrains the movement a little bit and it makes it easier to feel what your shoulder blade is doing. If lying down is not possible for you, you can stand up with your back to a door or a wall. Those are the 2 ways. I want your back on a hard surface, either standing or lying. So if you're standing, put your whole back flat against the door. So you got to back up really close to it so you can not lean on it, but be touching it. Put your hand on your head again, the same way we were doing in the class, in the first part. And begin to draw a line up and down with your elbow. And I'm using up and down in reference to your head and your feet. So headward and footward. And see if you can feel your shoulder blade, the plane of it moving so that the tip at the bottom comes forward as you go one way and the tip at the bottom goes backward as you go the other way. So the top of the shoulder presses into the floor at one direction of the line and the bottom of the shoulder blade presses into the floor at the other. And feel how it's the movement in your ribs and your spine that allows that shoulder blade to tip out away and toward. And rest. And then draw the line so that your elbow goes toward the ceiling and toward the floor if you're lying down. So it comes forward and backward if you're standing up. And feel how that motion makes your shoulder blade, the inside edge close to your spine presses on the floor in one direction, and the outside edge presses on the floor when you take your elbow the other way. It's like you're turning that socket by moving in the same plane as the back of your body. And then rest for a moment. So we talked about the planes of motion at the beginning, where you can tip your shoulder blade so that the bottom or the top goes toward the front, or the bottom or the top goes left and right. And then you can take it so that it rotates on a diagonal. If you take your hand up in the air and wave your hand left and right. And so then imagine your shoulder blade doing that left and right motion on the ground. See if you can connect your shoulder blade doing it to your hand doing it. If your elbow is softly bent as you move your hand left and right, see if you can feel your shoulder blade go left and right. It's like this, the tip at the bottom goes in toward your spine and away from your spine. Okay. Rest. Put your hand back on your head and very slowly draw a circle with your elbow on your imaginary chalkboard and sense how much your scapula is like surfing on your ribs, right? Press in different parts of it, press into the floor in different parts of the circle. Go the other direction. And rest for a moment. Put the same hand back on your head and try some figure eights. And see how many different places in the air you can make a figure eight. Feeling for how much your scapula is moving on the floor that presses against it or presses against the door if you're standing. On the floor, we've limited how much your spine can do the movement, so more of it happens in the scapula, but you feel your spine moving a little bit to allow the scapula to move. All right, rest with everything long. Or if you're on your back, you want to keep your knees bent, that's fine. But just both arms long by your side. And see if one arm feels longer than the other. One side of your neck might feel different than the other. And shrug that shoulder you've been working with. Just feel what it feels like to shrug it up and down. And as you shrug your shoulder up and down, sense what your clavicle is doing. Not your clavicle, your shoulder blade is doing. You'll feel it slide up the floor, but it moves in all these different planes, even just to shrug the shoulder. Okay. Let's even ourselves out a bit and do some exploration with the other side on the floor or the wall. Hand on your head. And this time, just imagine drawing a line headward and footward, up and down with your elbow. And see if, even in your imagination, you can feel a little bit of movement in that shoulder blade. And then try drawing the line headward and footward and see if the sensations you feel on the floor are what you imagined. And then go back to just imagining making that line and imagining moving the shoulder blade to make it. And then go back to real life and check it out. Sometimes in real life, you'll find your hips moving a little or your spine moving in a different way, and then try and incorporate whatever you notice into your imagination. And rest. And make your left-right line with the second elbow. Feel where the shoulder blade presses, how it's kind of like your shoulder blade is almost like the bottom of a rocking chair, going left, right rocking. And then stop actually doing it and imagine doing it. Imagine your shoulder blade is like greased on the inside, so it can do this rolling around your ribs effortlessly. And then do the movement in real life again, left and right. And rest for a moment. And then I see some people moving their legs around and things. Leave your knees bent if that keeps your back more comfortable. You can roll your pelvis a little left and right, just to kind of remember that you have a lower body. And then with this elbow, the second elbow, make a circle. So your hand on your head, making a circle, feeling how the shoulder blade moves underneath you to make the circle, where it presses into the floor. If you were in the sand, what shape would the shoulder blade be making in the sand? It kind of pushes the sand around in the circle. And go the other way. And then rest. And here's a little bonus piece. Do it if you want to. Don't do it if you don't. But take both your elbows in a circle. And do your elbows move at the same circle, or do they kind of go opposite each other? Like you do, if you were doing a figure 8, somehow you do a circle with one elbow and then a circle the other way with the other elbow. So it's like each elbow is making a circle on the wall or on its own board, and you do one and then the other. All right, let that go. And if you're on the ground, just lie with your arms long. If you're standing, hang your arms by your side. See if you're feeling a little bit more symmetric. And if you're on the ground, roll up to your side and come up to sitting. Stay in sitting for a moment. And come on, then after you've regained your equilibrium, come on up to standing. We're done with the ground part for today. And just feel what it feels like to stand up, where the weight is on your feet. Shift your weight from foot to foot. And see if there's some sensation as you shift your weight from foot to foot of your shoulder blades sliding along your ribs. If there's some way when you shift your weight, if you look at the skeleton for a moment, that if I'm shifting the weight onto this side, this shoulder moves a little closer to the spine and the other one moves a little away from the spine. So you can slide the shoulders left and right a little bit. Okay, and come and sit down. Sit in your chair and see what it's like if you slide your hand down your leg to pick up something you dropped. See if there's a little bit more reach in the shoulder blade, that you can feel that you get, your arm has somehow gotten a little longer and the floor a little closer. because there's a little more mobility in there. And then let's do one more piece that helps the other half of picking things up for the ground. And for that, stand up again and go find a wall that you can stand against. And stand about 6 inches, 4 to 6 inches in front of the wall. And with your back to the wall. So your back is 4 to 6 inches. I see some of you are a little bit more like a foot in front. Al, step a little closer to your door because or to a wall. And you probably, yeah, I think you'll be fine there. Even a little closer, reach back with one arm and just feel where the wall is. Feel how far back it is. And you want it to be just a few inches behind you. Because what you're going to do is bend over a little bit so your bottom touches the wall. We've done a little bit of this in another lesson of painting the wall with your bottom. But now I want you to draw an 8 on the wall with your bottom. And if your brain just goes blah, draw a line left and right with your bottom on the wall, and then a little bit of an up and down line with your bottom on the wall. So you'll have to bend your knees a little bit. You might find you need to roll your pelvis a little bit to draw the line up and down. And if you find that line up and down, try a little bit of a circle on the wall. And so you're actually touching your bottom back to the wall. That's why you need to be pretty close to it. Okay. And step 2 inches forward and rest there for a moment. And then reach back and touch the wall with your bottom. And once touch with your left cheek and once with your right cheek. Okay, good. And then step 2 inches forward. And bend your knees, bend your ankles as you try to touch your bottom to the wall. Just feel how your bottom has to go backward in order to touch the wall. Okay. And come on up to standing. And very slowly take one hand on your thigh and begin to follow that hand down. So your hand goes down as you begin to bend down toward the floor. Come away from the wall so your bottom has lots of room behind you. Because the more you take your bottom backwards, the easier it is for you, and fold in your knees, the easier it is to get down to the floor. Because getting down to pick something up has 2 parts. The shoulder blade needs to come away from the spine, but we need to fold in the hip joint and take our sit bones way far backward. It's like you want to reach your sit bones further back behind you to go down. And just to feel the opposite, if you don't let your hips go back, see how far down you can slide your hand without feeling unstable. It's not very far, but the further you let your bottom go back, the further your hand can go down. So come back to sitting. And in sitting, try sliding your hand down your arm with that same sense of your bottom going backwards, and see if that helps you get down to pick something up a little easier. And then once try gluing your shoulder blade to your ribs. Don't let your shoulder blade move, and try and pick something up. It's like, no, we've had enough experience doing that. And then let your shoulder blade move as you go down. Let's see if the sensation inside is that it's a little more slippery on that shoulder blade. Try that motion that Joan talked about at the beginning of punching a little bit up across yourself with your hands close to your body, and feel how your shoulder blades, what they're doing in the back as you do that. And then try and lead that motion with your shoulder blades. And then go back to leading it with your spine twisting. And then lead with your fists. It's like the same motion, so many different ways to do it. And then lead the motion with your hips. So slide one sit bone forward, just bend your arms. And if you slide one sit bone forward and back. It's like we need to use the body as a team, and we also need the mobility in the shoulder blades to make this feel nice. Yeah. And then now try lifting your arm. And as you lift just the lower part of the lift, sense the shoulder blade drop down and point down toward your bottom, toward your other side of your pelvis. And then feel the place where then it releases and it lifts up in order to reach way up. And it gets wide and it comes away from your spine. And coming back down, it comes down. And then there's this, just this kind of motion in there. Yeah. And wave, do a big left-right wave and feel how you're, a princess wave. Yeah, nice. Try that with your other hand. Feeling when your shoulder blade gets pulled away and when it gets pulled in. All right. Stand up and walk around a little bit to see what walking feels like after this play. So as you're trying to stand up, think of your bottom going backward as your head goes forward. Good. Yeah, walk fast. You're going somewhere in a hurry. And see if there's just a little easier arm swing. Okay. And come back to your chair. Let's open it up for discussion. Anyone have comments about today's lesson, questions, things they'd like me to address Thursday or next week? Elizabeth.
Yes, I cannot seem to mentally or physically get in touch with what my shoulder blade is doing. I'm working with a physical therapist, and the things that we've been doing have been really helpful. And I'd like to make an individual appointment with you to work some more on this because I need this.
We have each other's emails, so let's do that. Yeah. The wall is always your, we're not used to feeling our shoulder blades. And I know that you have some ongoing shoulder challenges. And I remember if I've told this story, I worked with a little boy and he couldn't remember the word for elbow because he didn't really know how his elbows worked. They were just all loose and floppy. And once we found it, then the image stuck in his brain and he could remember it. So it's not surprising that a shoulder problem, if you have had pain in your shoulder you've probably immobilized that shoulder blade for a long time because you're afraid of causing the pain. And so that it's not surprising that it's hard to find it. You might find that playing with some of today's lesson lying in your bed, which is a little softer, might give some feedback in how the shoulder blade is moving. Yeah, because it really has a big range of motion. I like to think like if I lie on my back, I could squeeze my shoulder blades and pick up a ball and move it around. That they can come back that much. Colleen.
So I think one of my shoulder blades is like 70 years old and the other one is like 20 years old. And I realized I just use one shoulder for everything, and it probably bears all the brunt of all the skiing and pulling and, you know, jerking on it all these years. And it's stickier, right, in the ball kind of. But the other one moves great. And I thought, well, I could use the other one a little more. And it also gave me the feeling my body can feel like that. You can feel okay, you know, there.
So one of them released easier than the other into that easier movement.
It was a huge difference. And I didn't realize it because, of course, I started with the one I always use. And then it was a revelation, like, oh.
Sometimes that one works better than the other because of little scoliosis patterns in our spine, because the spine has to move in order for the shoulder blade to move. And so working on some of the side bending motions and seeing, do you curve the same way on both sides? And if you can begin to find that side bending in here more symmetrically, that helps the shoulder blade. And the pushing your chest out and pulling your belly in, you may be doing differently left and right. And so those are the things that will lock it on one side.
So maybe that's the next lesson.
Maybe that's a side bending next, more side bending and arching. Okay. I have this image. Remember one week I showed a video of a man with no arms and no legs, and it had him walking, and it was like his feet were attached to his sit bones, and he lifted one up, moved it forward, put it down, lifted one up, moved it forward and put it down. To me, the shoulder blade is like the pelvis, because it's where the socket is. So if you imagine right in this joint here, you have a hand, right where this ball and socket is. You've got I don't know, I can't quite get the angle right. Maybe this one, a hand there. And so if you didn't have the arm to move and you had to move that socket where you wanted to go, that might give you more connection to the shoulder blade and your spine. It's like, so I've got a little hand here and I want to make handprints in different places.
I didn't see that movie.
I'll start with it on Thursday. It's short. It's or if you want to stay on for a minute after class, I can play it again.
Whatever you like.
Okay, I'll stay and play it now, and I'm going to stop the recording. And anybody who wants to stay and see it again, stay. And otherwise, I'll see you on Thursday.